Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for. And no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. All right, guys, you know that song. That song is the intro song to our next panelist. Patricia Marquez is going to tell us the work that she has done to help us scale impact. And before I welcome Patricia, I want to ask you guys to also help with scaling impact. I've got a visual. It's happening. What is this, world? It's a hashtag. How do we use hashtags? We use our fingers. We put it next to a piece of image or an idea, really maybe an inspirational idea. And this hooks up in an interesting way to our theme. So it's a way to scale messages through technology. But I want to introduce a core concept to you guys, which is that leadership changes over time. We used to live in a world where leadership was one charismatic individual who drove change. And then we saw the emergence of a new paradigm, a team, a leadership team, the innovation lab, perhaps, or the scrappy startup, or the collective of artists. And we're now in a new phase, I think, where network systems are actually the leaders. Who here knows who started the Me Too hashtag movement? Who here knows what the Me Too hashtag movement is? All right, that's a great example. So you guys have the ability to have networked impact, and I would invite you to share some of what you learned today, and this is a way to collectivize that. That's why I think this matters, because we are a part of networked leadership patterns. And Patricia is also doing her work in that way, because as she pointed out to me, this is an amazing community, and it's also a community that can fit in a tent. How do we scale that community? How do we build communities for the future? If we really do want to envision this future, this abundant future, this future driven by solving real business problems and investing in those business problems with impact investment enabled by technology, how do we prepare professionals for the future to do that? So Patricia is going to join us now. She is Dean of Peace Studies at the University of San Diego. Please give her a round of applause to welcome her to the stage.
Well, thank you for having me in Oslo. Thank you, Crown Princess. I thought it was going to be really cold, and now I'm finding it's even warmer than San Diego. It's almost as warm as Venezuela, where I'm from. So if we want peace, we must educate for peace. So if we go back in history, and let's just stay with today. How many schools of business are there in the world? Do we know? Hundreds? Thousands? They're everywhere. But this wasn't always the case. If we go back 123 years, that was the day when, in 1895, Charles Eliot, who was the president of Harvard University, read an article by an alum, George Layton. And Layton had a problem, a big problem. He was the president of the Los Angeles Railway Terminal. And as such, he needed railroad officials that he described as not only men of affairs, but lawyer, engineer, financier, economist, accountant. This is the 19th century. It's an era of growth and expansion where the railroads and the telegram were connecting people and resources like never before. Layton, because of his work in railways, understood the great opportunity ahead with this connectivity. He also understood the complications, the many decisions that needed to be made, where to build the lines, tariff, traffic, how much does a ticket cost, supervisors, workers. decisions that require specific knowledge and skill sets. Even though he didn't know it at the time, what Layton really wanted was well-trained MBAs. So it took a while, a lot of letters to President Eliot, but eventually Harvard University opened Harvard Business School in 1908. There were, at that moment, only a handful of schools of business everywhere. So this meant, and this is the first cohort that graduated that year, it meant Harvard had to create everything from scratch. Find professors, cases, reading materials, what subjects? Everything. It even had to figure out where to get a founding dean, which happened to be a historian. So this would take time and persistence. And as the founding dean wrote in a letter, he was getting tired of hearing that business cannot be taught. But now, if we think of today, managers, entrepreneurs, schools of business are everywhere. So something that 100 and some years ago was not considered an academic discipline, now we have all kinds of professors, we have all kinds of PhDs. And the impact of business education is undeniable. So this was a response by the university to an important demand of the 20th century. The need for managers to lead complex industrial organizations. We can see the impact everywhere. I contend that if we go now to the present, to our 21st century, our challenge is one of peaceful coexistence. Our reality is one of diversity, density, and complete connectivity. Estimates said by the middle of the 21st century, we'll have 10 billion people in this world. Those 10 billion people will live in cities, about 70%. Our future is in cities. So in this context of increasing diversity, density, and connectivity, we must train professionals of peace, people who can lead with conflict, that can transform conflict, people who can build resilient communities, people who can do social and think and act social innovation. In this crowded planet, we're all neighbors. Whether we're on the airplane, and maybe I just came in on Sunday, very crowded, whether we're down the hall, down the road, across the ocean, we're all close to each other. And we all know neighbors can be wonderful, but they also can drive you insane. So if we think about our challenge of coexistence, let's think about it for a little second. So when we see diversity, let's go back to a city that we all know, or many of us know, and we love, New York City. With its population of 8.5 million people, more than 200 languages spoken, 40% of its population born outside the United States. This is an amazing city with great food, incredible culture happening. But in this city, all kinds of ongoing and a rate of ongoing negotiations take place. Small and big differences need to be managed. So for example, Orthodox Jews want to restrict traffic in their neighborhoods to oversee their religious strictures. Harlem, for example, is the historical black part of the city. And African Americans, with great reason, are not always happy about the gentrification of Harlem, because increasing property value and changes and improvements in infrastructure are wonderful, but they tend to put a burden on the people with a lower income. So this is just an example of how an incredible city must be trained, must have people with the tools to deal with small and large pressures, which is what happens today and will continue to be so as our population grows in numbers. So to the challenge of diversity, let's add the challenge of density to increase the levels of complexity. So let's look at a slum like Kibera in Nairobi, with some estimates of about 1 million people in an area that is 3/4 the size of Central Park. Let's just try to picture what everyday life is like here. Let's think about Mexico City, another incredible place full of history and rich traditions, with a population over 21 million people. Again, try to imagine what it's like to provide electricity, water, road repair in such a city. How many of you have been in Mexico City? Okay, quite a few. This is a city that nowadays requires somebody who does this work. Do you know what this is? This is a sewage diver. This is real. Because sometimes it gets so full of, crap, that somebody needs to jump in and figure out where to unplug it. So when we think about this, it's not just, again, a density in terms of how to provide services, but if we think about Cape Town, one of the most beautiful cities in the world, with about 1.8 million tourists visiting per year, it's about to face day zero. They're running out of water. So whatever happens in terms of diversity and density, what we do know is that we're going to face this challenge together because of our connectivity. So when we think about our connectivity, we must always be the optimist. It has provided great opportunities. For example, when we think about 70% of the population owns a mobile phone and how that creates opportunities for education, for connecting, for finance. But at the same time, let's not lose sight when we think about the challenge of peaceful coexistence, that it also, when you have a message that says, ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii, seek immediate shelter, this is not a drill. Well, it doesn't matter whether you're a local or a tourist, you panic. And this is true, this just happened not that long ago. So when we think about this, we are a dense, crowded, and connected community. And this is not just it. A tragic example of our challenge is how many people in this planet are currently displaced. 66 million people. That's nearly 1 in 100 people have left their homes. Imagine how bad the situation has to become, and I can say that because I left Venezuela, how bad it has to become for you to abandon everything that you know and that you love. This is a reality for many people around the world. Clark Abullah is a journalist, and she writes the story of Ahmed, a 67-year-old man who left Syria with his family. So they were supposed to be moved from Libya to Malta by Tunisian smugglers. While in Libya, they ran into human traffickers who kept them and subject them for all kinds of abuse. Eventually, they managed to board a ship with 200 other passengers. When they were in that ship, all of a sudden, militiamen come on board. And they demand bribe, which, no-brainer, they prove impossible for this impoverished community. So enraged, these gunmen start shooting, killing and injuring people, and causing the boat to sink. So instead of a better life, what Ahmed found was he lost 8 family members and ended up in a refugee camp in Malta with a broken heart and not will to live. The global quest for a better life, it's global, it's universal. But it's under threat every day, everywhere. This migrant crisis is like the canary in the coal mine, warning us that if we are not capable of building communities in which we can coexist peacefully, And this does not mean just the absence of conflict, violent conflict. This means shaping communities in where all people have the opportunity to thrive, to feel safe, to feel included. And I contend this is not going to happen without intention. And this is going to take way too long, or it might not happen without the role of universities educating us in a different way. Training professionals of peace, people who can, as part of their careers, as part of their profession, think how to tackle these issues to shape communities for better coexistence. So let me tell you how we do this, how we train professionals of peace. So one of the things that we do, we teach strategies and we teach methods. If you think about Houston and you think about Puerto Rico post-hurricane, there's no doubt that Houston had greater resilience to bounce from a crisis. They were better prepared to react, better prepared to come afloat and do a better job. So when we think about resilience in communities, it takes processes, people, institutions. It also involves certain levels of trust in people and trust in some degrees of functionality. So we prepare professionals to build this resilience in cities, to transform crises and problems into opportunities, into something that moves forward. Number two, we focus on innovation. We all know that famous quote, whether it was Einstein or not, it doesn't matter. The definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over and over again and think we're going to get a different result. So innovation is central. And how is that happening at the university? How does that happen at a school that teaches peace? It happens in the intersections of discipline. It happens through the combination of new learning methods. This is a course on engineering peace, in which students of engineering come together with students in peace, activists. So in the middle, his name is Washira. He's from Thailand, and he manages refugee camps. And he's trying to figure it out whether drones can help deal with the fact that many of the refugee camps are experiencing fires. They're like matchboxes. So that was one experiment that he did. He took the course, and they do design thinking, they build things, and they must get out of the classroom and see whether it works, often to find out that it doesn't quite work as they anticipated. But it's this experimentation that really feeds the innovator mindset that we need for the 21st century, that develops professionals of peace. And here's Washira. We also have a social innovation, not an incubator, not a lab, but a social innovation challenge. And he and his team are going to be presenting at Oxford in a month in terms of mapping the system. And then they're going to be presenting their proposal to deal with this, which is actually a lot simpler than using drones. But I don't have time to tell you. And during the break, if you're curious, just let me know. So that's another thing that we do. Another component that is essential for peace education is that we must do learning in real time. So at the school, we have a network of 1,000 women peace builders. And Yamandao is one of them. She comes to San Diego. Yamandao is a police officer from the Gambia. And in her work, she has done tremendous things that show what it means to be a courageous doer. And she shares her stories. And not only that, because that's not enough, is in a couple of months, students and researchers are going to visit Yamandao in the Gambia and to see her work in action. And also explore their own local lessons to the Gambia. So in sum, we need to train professionals of peace. If the founding dean of the Harvard Business School was capable of proving all skeptics wrong, it happens that business can be taught, and it has been done so in a way that has created in the last 100 years great prosperity and great wealth, and I would also argue wonderful change. So if that can happen, we can train people to build communities in which all individuals have the opportunity to thrive, to feel safe, and to feel included. Today, the Kroc School of Peace Studies, an early innovator in peace education. My hope, my dream is that in 100 years, there are hundreds of thousands of schools around the world training professionals of peace who are succeeding at creating a more just and humane world. Thank you.